America. This video is going to be a little bit different than my last ones. This one is a particular argument that those who are anti-firearms, anti-Second Amendment, and anti-prepper tend to produce against us. Those who are anti-prepper tend to look at us and spout lines like calling us Chicken Little or mentioning that the sky is falling. You'll note that they are quick to remember this fable, but forget the lesson. There's also two other lessons from fables that they readily forget. Oh, Chicken Little, yes, that wasn't, a case of unfounded warnings against the sky falling, of unnecessary preparation. Well, for every time we've seen this on every forum, every YouTube post, every YouTube video, every Vimeo link, and every discussion online we've seen, and even seen in the newspaper and on televised news, I know for a fact that every person that I've talked to in my real life interactions who has brought this up against actions of me and mine, why we prepare as survivalists. Note I use the term survivalist, not prepper. Every time they use this argument against us, instead of arguing back, it leaves a wonderfully joyous opportunity for me to sit them down, usually over a nice cup of coffee, and let them know why I do what I do. Well, let's get to that point with the two fables they are all too readily forget. Alright, the first, the boy who cried wolf. As I'm fairly certain that most of you will not want to hear an entire recanting of this tale over YouTube, I will give you the much abbreviated Cliff's Notes version. In a small camping village, or logging village, depending on who you ask and who tells the tale, a boy thought it would be fun to decry a disaster. That disaster was wolf. Well, in the timeline of this story, regardless of who tells it, a wolf was a serious disaster. It could ruin livestock, it could ruin lives, it could end lives. For that community, a wolf was quite possibly one of their biggest fears. Well, he continued to decry wolf, wolf, when there never was one. And constantly he would do this, much to the irk and ire of every farmer and every hunter in his village. He did so often that eventually everyone in the village grew deaf to his cries. But unfortunately, one day, the wolf did come. And when it did not end well for the boy. The reason I bring this story up is the fact that the lesson learned from it. What we're seeing, the Aesop, if you will, is what we're seeing in today's government. They are taking skewed numbers, skewed statistics that are marginalized, fictionalized, and oftentimes outright wrong to the point of being a rather large lie, and decrying a national emergency. Make no mistake, the events that happened in Aurora at Sandy Hook, those were disasters, but they were local disasters. Not entirely needing for those of us who choose to enjoy and wish to protect our rights as American citizens to suddenly suspend, place upon hiatus, or entirely give up those rights. We will not marginalize our rights, for it's not a national disaster. The second Aesop. This one is of the ant and the grasshopper. Yet again, I'm fairly certain you don't want to hear me give the full story, and if you do, well, post a link down below, I'll make a separate video for you. But you're getting the Cliff's Notes version today. This story has two tellings, one more lighthearted, and the other far more harsh, and some would say more real. The ant and the grasshopper went about their business during the summer. The ant toiled away, stowing back as much food and supplies as he would need for the winter. The grasshopper gave no care for the morrow, and merely lazed about enjoying his days. Well, lo and behold, the winter did come, and it was a harsh one. Here's where our story takes two divergent paths. The path that I would prefer to believe, and this is strictly based upon the storyteller, is that the ant, upon seeing the grasshopper being left with absolutely nothing, no fruits of his labors, for he did not labor, took the grasshopper in and taught him the lesson that he needed to learn. He shared of the bounty that he had collected and gave that person who had no care for the morrow not only shelter and food, as well as an important lesson, but gave him means to survive. I would like to believe that most preppers and a good fair amount of survivalists out there would do this for their neighbors. The second retelling is that the ant sealed himself away deep within his burrow, away from the harsh, cold winter. The grasshopper, lamenting his actions all throughout the summer, had nothing. He unfortunately starved, froze, and of course, died. Sadly, there will be some preppers who prefer story B, or rather the alternate ending. We can't entirely change that. But we as preppers have learned the lesson of both of these fables well. We have learned not to decry disaster when there is none, and we have learned to prepare. The reason I've brought up the fact that everybody I've known in real life who decries with the broken Aesop with Chicken Little, do as I say, not as I do, they've always had preparations on a small scale, usually for personal disaster. A little bit of money stuck back for a rainy day, small amount of supplies, but yet still give no care for the morrow. Well, we've seen disasters hit. We've seen horrific tragedies such as the aftermath of Katrina and Rita, where so many were left homeless. We've seen the aftermath of Hurricane Sandy recently. And in a non-natural disaster, a man-made one, we have the events of April 26th, 1992. If you're not all too familiar with this date, you'll be familiar with its name. The LA riots. That was a man-made disaster. Good Samaritans, thankfully, were present in all three. But those who give no care for the morrow can't always count on the blessings of a Good Samaritan. We as survivalists and preppers must do everything within our power to be that Good Samaritan. We cannot let that lesson go to waste. I bring this forth for the simple fact that it's very easy to have selective memory. It's very easy to remember a story, but not the lesson. We must never, ever forget the lesson. The story we can forget. If you forget the lesson, well, that's information lost. And back to the reason why I call myself a survivalist as opposed to a prepper. While it is true I do prepare for natural disasters, as well as unnatural ones, that is not the extent of who I am or what I do. Most preppers store food, water, fuel, ammunition, and a few certain things such as medicine and toiletries. Anyone who's ever been through a natural disaster or an unnatural one will tell you it's good to do this. Not only does it allow you to prepare for the worst case scenario, it also means in your daily day-to-day life you will use less, You will consume less, meaning you are stretching your dollar as well as your own materials further. It's a good lesson to learn. One lesson that a lot of preppers tend to overlook is that of medical supplies and of medical knowledge. Go out, learn CPR, go take a few first responders classes, learn triage. Cuts, burns, fractures, broken bones, dislocations, non-life-threatening injuries can quickly become threatening, life-threatening, in a disaster scenario such as completely inclement weather and freakishly disastrous weather as we've seen. But with that said, you've also got man-made disasters that one must prepare for as well, such as a unexpected drop of a supply line. This was seen during April 26, 1992, during the LA riots. Not much could get in or out of that city. A lot of that city burned. The reason I state to learn as much as you can about medicine, about triage, about CPR, about evacuation techniques, about patient treatment, is the fact that I learned that on one mantra. The person you save may just save you. I would much rather save a life, even if not repaid in any way, shape, or form, than to let a person die. That just reflects poorly on me as a person if I let that person die, and I've also got to deal with that guilt in the back of my mind for the rest of my life, that I could have done something, that I should have done something. We've got to take that very seriously, and I'm hoping that most people who watch this will have learned these lessons already, and that I will not have had to teach them this, that I will just be going over material which has been gone over before. I can't count on it, but I always use these examples when met with somebody who is radically anti-gun, radically anti-Second Amendment, radically anti-First Amendment, someone who is anti-prepper or sees us as some out there movement of crazed bush-wandering peoples with violent intentions and the desire to see this nation burn. Well, we're not. We're the same as you. Some of us are unemployed, some of us are self-employed. Some of us prepare your meals, others drive your ambulances. Some police the streets. We are a coalition of people which is rather diverse. Same as the nation that we are born from, the United States. We are a proverbial melting pot in both our state and our mentalities. The reason I say all of this is back to the first Aesop of the boy who cried wolf. Well, our very nation, as stated before, is crying wolf. They are decrying national disaster when really it's a localized one. A localized disaster, while tragic, is treatable. A national disaster is a far, far more challenging beast to bring down. We must unite in the common ground of dialogue, communication. Get out there, speak to people, educate people, start changing hearts and minds. At the very least, you might learn something of yourself. You might improve yourself. If you improve others, that's great too. In fact, that's part of the goal. But go forth trying to leave this world a better place. Go forth trying to make yourself a better person. Close-mindedness, avarice, hatred, greed, all of these are hallmarks of the sociopaths who wish to divide us. And I say this term sociopath because, well, be they pro or anti-gun, be they pro-media, anti-media, the politician that has only his well-meaning in mind and cares not for the populace genuinely is a sociopath, regardless of their leanings. My leanings are pro-gun. Not for the fact that I want to see a gun in every household, not for the fact that I want to see every citizen armed. There's a lot of people who don't need to be armed, trust me. My history in gun sales has taught me this all too well, and I have turned down many a gun sale for the simple fact that the person was either belligerent, trying to commit a straw purchase, or just in general, not the kind of person you would ever want to see with a loaded weapon due to irresponsibility. It's not my place to judge, and I generally won't. But during my tenure of gun sales, it was my place to ensure that we were following the law. The spirit of the law, not just the letter of the law. I took this job rather seriously, as I take all of my work. What I ask of you is to go out there, talk to your congressmen and senators, as I've always stated, as I've always left the links down below, and I will continue to leave the links down below. If you're pro-gun, even if you're anti-gun, we can't afford to let any of our freedoms slip. The simple fact, they're working on the idea of what's called a wedge policy. They introduce a wedge like you would into a log when you're splitting it. Once that tip of that wedge is set, it just takes time and pressure for the log to crack. And once it does, you're never putting it back together. Get out there, make a difference, use your voice. You might just win over people you never thought you could. Be rational, be calm, be open to dialogue, be considerate, be polite. That's all I could ever ask of anybody. As always, stay positive, and I will see you later, America. Thank you for watching.